The science is hard, but there's things that are harder, and that is bringing people concerns into our decision making. I think it just gives us a tip of the iceberg on how challenging coastal management and science and policy combinations can be if we sort of operate in a vacuum. And so we really do need to connect to each other.
Welcome to Shaping Shores, the Centennial podcast of the American Shore and Beach Preservation Association. For 100 years, ASBPA has united people across science, policy, and practice to preserve U.S. shores and beaches. If you're listening, you should be one of these people. Become a member or make a gift today at asbpa.org. I'm your host, Nicole Elko, ASBPA's Executive Director, and today we're excited to continue our monthly series with ASBPA's local legends, current presidents of each ASBPA chapter, to uncover the stories, challenges, and triumphs that have shaped their organizations. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Doug George, a geological oceanographer at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration based in San Francisco. He's the National Estuarine Research Reserve Science Collaborative Program Manager, and Doug is also the president of ASBPA's California Shore and Beach Preservation Association chapter. Doug, welcome. Thank you for being with me today.
Hi, Nicole. Thanks for having me.
So we're excited to hear your story, first of all, about how it is that you found this sort of interesting and unique career of coastal management, coastal geology. Everyone has kind of a fun story, and I know yours is kind of fun, and you got here in an interesting way. So why don't we start there?
Sure thing. Everyone has a journey. That's true. So I grew up in the high desert, Mojave Desert, north of LA. And it's beautiful for 3 weeks of the year when the poppies are blooming. The rest of the time, it's a pretty harsh place to live. And I was doing anything I could to get out of there. My family used to go to the beaches down in Southern California. You know, we go to Zuma Beach, we go to Manhattan Beach, go to San Diego, Santa Barbara. All those beaches were sort of my playground. And every time I went, I just fell in love with the ocean a little bit more. It was just everything opposite of the desert. But I didn't know that there was an actual career that you could make out of loving the ocean until I think I was around 12. And we went to Monterey, another beautiful part of California. And we went to Point Lobos State Park, which is south of Carmel. And I went out on the rocks out there, and the waves were pounding against this geology that was foreign to me. And the water was frothing, and I was just mesmerized by it. And I said, I don't know what it is, but I want to do this. I want to do ocean something, and it has to be waves, and it has to be big, and it has to be dynamic. And that's when I discovered that you could be a geological oceanographer. And that was it for me. I was seduced by 12, and off and running I went. So a little desert rat turned into an ocean guy.
Such a cool story. So, Doug, this is amazing. My story is actually pretty similar. I was in college at Penn State, where I grew up in Pennsylvania, had gone to be a forestry major. When I went on a trip out west with a friend of mine, and I was on the Big Sur coastline, very close to where you are, and I had almost the same experience. I was like, holy cow, where am I? And I don't know what this is, but I'm going to do this. So that's fantastic.
It's a thing. It hooks you, right? And you said we said the same thing. It just gets in your mind and takes over your body.
Yes, the California coastline is very magical. Tell us a little bit more about that. You know, we talk a lot on this podcast about people that are involved with ASBPA, typically kind of exemplifying our mission of merging science and public policy. And you certainly do that. You know, you're not just a coastal geologist. So tell us a little bit about kind of your work and the setting, the beautiful setting you're in, and some of what you do.
Sure. I was always interested in my science meaning something and doing something through application. And it took a little while from an academic track, you know, after grad school, after doing a master's degree and in Canada, and figuring out that I could I could be a scientist and study the coastline, but I wanted it to mean something a little bit more than I've produced a great academic paper. And why aren't people citing my paper and this paper? So it became a little bit more of a journey for me to understand how science does connect more to policy and to decision making. And I was really fortunate to start practicing something that I didn't know how to name, which was collaborative science. So, collaborative science is, by definition, bringing together decision makers, managers, scientists, community members, tribes, whoever is in the area to make decisions that are fueled by science. And yet, not science being by itself. Science is right there all along. The managers are there all along. The community members are there all along. We're all working together because individually we can't achieve what we can achieve together. So the real definition of collaboration and applied science is bringing us together every step of the way, all the way through the project process until the very end. And so I was sort of practicing that without knowing it had a name, that it had a whole theory behind it. And then I was fortunate to come to NOAA about 6 years ago and learn about this program called the NERS Science Collaborative. So the National Estuarine Research Reserve System, the 30 reserves around the country, has a dedicated program to stimulate collaborative science because these places are so small on their geography, but so big in what they can accomplish because they bring together the managers, they bring together the community, they bring together the scientists, they bring together educators, and we all work together to solve a problem or move information from one place to another. So here in California, we have three of those reserves. One here in San Francisco Bay, one in the Monterey Bay area, and one right on the border with Mexico, the Tijuana River Estuary Reserve. And all three of the reserves have been in my backyard. I've walked around them, not knowing that they were there, and then little by little, through time, got to know that they practice this collaborative science approach in these beautiful, very diverse locations, from deserty style with Tijuana to Central Coast again in Monterey and Elkhorn Slough to here in San Francisco Bay, when a very urbanized estuary. And then around the country, all these reserves that practice this approach. And it's given me more insight into the science is hard, but there's things that are harder, and that is bringing people concerns into our decision making. And we can talk more about that later, but I think it just gives us a tip of the iceberg on how challenging coastal management and science and policy combinations can be if we sort of operate in a vacuum. And so we really do need to connect to each other. So that's what one of the things I really love about what we do as an organization too, is that that's part of our purpose, is connecting.
When you were describing the purpose of the Science Collaborative, the terminology that's being thrown around a lot nowadays popped into my head, which is co-production of science. And that term is new, but the doing the thing is not that new. So you've been working your whole career kind of talking to people first and then saying, oh, okay, this is the science answer or this is the science research that we should go do to help them answer this challenge. And that's right. That's what we talk about as co-production today. I still don't think a lot of groups are doing it as well as maybe you're collaborative, but it's a great educational platform for that we like to promote through our organization.
Always room to grow, but the more the merrier as we practice this, and decisions just get better.
So tell us about some of the communities that you work with out there. I know Beacon is a member community at ASBPA, and y'all do some work there. So do you have any stories or examples of sort of working with community members or what that feels like?
Oh yeah. So I know coastal communities all over the country are never shy with their opinions. And certainly California is very loud in its opinions when it comes to the coast. And Beacon, which covers the Santa Barbara and Ventura counties and the municipalities within the two counties, is just a wonderful example of when you bring together the management, decision makers, and they ask for science. They say, we need science to make some decisions. And so they charged Mark Baylor, who's on the ASBPA board, and he's one of the editors of Shore and Beach, um, asked him to bring more science into the decision-making process. And so he found me. We'd known each other for a while, and said, "Hey, do you want to be our science advisor?" I said, "Sure. I'll put my CSBPA hat on and I'll be your science advisor for a little while." And that has led to such an explosion of growth for Beacon. We developed a science agenda, which is guiding the research in the region. We've presented back to the Beacon board, and they've given us great questions, and they give us their full support to continue digging into sediment transport, to understanding how the littoral cells are affecting moving sediment from one part of the coast to another part of the coast. There's so much they've been engaging with us on. And then that's led to a couple of manager scientist summits where we open it up to the public. And gosh, people love to have the scientists in the room. It's, as a scientist, it's exciting to be invited into conversations, especially in the current state of affairs where science is being questioned and tested quite a bit right now. But I think those who understand the power of science, and they understand that when it's done with community members and community input, that it becomes a sum greater than the parts. And I think Beacon has really embraced that. And I always love to go down there and visit those beautiful coastlines, and see the Channel Islands off in the distance, which was a whole different thing. But just the opportunity to have the support of elected officials saying, "Please come give us your science because we have challenging decisions to make, and we need that input." And that's been really fulfilling personally, but also professionally, because I think it just demonstrates that this work, there's an appetite for this kind of work. We can do this kind of work given the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, such an important connection to have. Mark making the connection with you and back to ASBPA. We've also talked with another one of our coastal champions already this year, Bob Battaglio, and I understand he has had a role in kind of your story of finding CSBPA.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Bob is a titan of his own, right? He's moved mountains literally, probably through his career, through all the design work that he's done. So many years ago now, I was moving out of grad school, moving into uh, I'll just say this as a little aside. I went back to school later in life. It can be done. I got my PhD 10 years after I started my PhD, 10 years after I finished my master's. So going back to school and pursuing a dream is still very viable. I was finishing that up, and Bob and I had known each other for a while. We worked on a couple of regional sediment management plans here in California, and done some work together up in Washington State. And he thought that I might be someone that would be a valuable contributor to CSBPA because I was interested in the conversation, the big conversation of science and policy and preserving our coastline and protecting the resources that we have and making better use of what we do have and understanding where we don't have things. Um, and I love the ocean. Bob's a big wave surfer. I am not a big wave surfer. But he was really instrumental in introducing me to the organization. I had gone to the ASBPA conference in 2012 in San Diego, and that was really all I knew about the ASBPA world. And so this was 2016 when he nominated me to be on the CSBPA board, and I said, "Sure, I'll take a crack at this. I guess if Bob thinks I'm worth something on this board, then maybe I should listen to him." And I'm really happy I have. I'm really happy that I've done it, and it's been now what, 9 years, 10 years, that I've been involved with CSBPA, and organized a conference in Bodega. That was one of our biannual conferences, and participated in some of our community workshops, and community efforts on snapping the sand, which I know ASBPA showcased that tool in the tool showcase in 2025, and just kept on growing within the organization. And I think the moment I would say made me extremely happy, and I hope it made Bob proud too, was when he came to one of our H2Os, which are our big, another our second annual conference that we hold. He came to it after he'd been out of retirement or had retired and moved on from the board, and he was there doing his thing, and I was just really excited to show him that I was fulfilling, hopefully, his vision of what I could be doing for the organization and for our community. And we had a toast to that. I thanked him, and you know, he may or not remember that, but I do because it was important to thank the person who helped introduce me to all of this.
Right. Well, we thank him as well. And as I mentioned in the introduction, you ascended to president recently with CSBPA, so the journey is complete. And it was fun last year at the H2O ASBPA conference that we held jointly in Long Beach to see you giving out the CSBPA awards. You mentioned Titans, Bob Battaglio being one of them, but there are two awards that CSBPA gives at the H2O conference, and I'd love to hear your perspective on those. We can start with the Joe Johnson Award for Outstanding Service.
Sure thing. Now, these awards are so special to us. So yeah, the Joe Johnson Award is a outstanding service award, and it's named after one of the titans of coastal engineering. Joe was at UC Berkeley in 1942 was when he started his career. World War II was going on. The U.S. Navy needed a lot of information for their amphibious operations. And so he was brought in as a junior researcher with some of the big names, O'Brien, Sverdrup, to study waves and beaches that to help the Navy understand how to do their wartime activities. And eventually, he just became a coastal engineering advocate and leader himself. This is Joe I'm talking about. He helped really grow coastal engineering through his work around the world. He literally worked in so many different countries: Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Egypt. He worked on the Suez Canal. He worked in Canada. And of course, he worked in California. And here in the Bay Area, he helped understand the water levels when we were building. I was not born yet, but when when they were building the really expansive rapid transit system for the Bay Area, he helped understand water levels, which is really important when you have trains crossing the San Francisco Bay underwater and going along the coastline. So he is instrumental in developing coastal engineering and coastal science around the world. But in addition to that, so he was a technical leader. But really, I think what also helped him stand out was that he believed in community development and of the community of coastal engineering and coastal science. So he helped organize the first international conferences on coastal engineering, the ICEEs, and then did 15 of them in the 1960s and 70s. I've done two conferences. I'm good. I think 15, that's a dedication. He also went on to become the editor-in-chief of our own journal, Shore and Beach, from 1974 to 1988. So he was building education, he was building communication, he was building community, and he won so many awards in his career, in his lifetime. National Academy of Engineering. He won awards from Berkeley. He won an award from the Army Corps of Engineers, from the Department of Army. So he ran the spectrum on all the different ways you can be a contributor to a discipline. And so CSBPA honored him in 1989 and started this award that honors a member in California who is an engineer, a planner, a scientist, an innovator, who's really contributed to to the preservation and understanding of our coastline here in California. So that's our Joe Johnson Award, and we've had amazing awardees over the last 30 plus years now.
Right. Yeah, such a great story of a titan in the field that started out in that time when, right before the war, coastal engineering was kind of like a rule of thumb thing. Like there wasn't much engineering or science whatsoever. So to have someone that was there when it started and led when it started to contribute to ASBPA, it really exemplifies, I think, the local legends and coastal champions that we're talking with on this series is they're more than just a coastal engineer. And I think your other award is the same way, right? You mentioned that the science engineering is sometimes not the hardest part in this industry. So your Peter Douglas Award kind of speaks to that.
So yeah, so the Peter Douglas Award is our newest award. We started this only 2 years ago, and this is the Coastal Stewardship Award. And for those of you who don't know who Peter Douglas was, he was an environmentalist, is kind of how he would describe himself. But I would add to that that he really helped us create the field of coastal zone management as well. So we have Joe Johnson who helped coastal engineering, and we have Peter Douglas who helped create coastal zone management. And Peter also has a World War II connection, actually. He was born in Berlin in 1942, and his family unfortunately lost their home during Allied bombing raids. So in 1950, he and his family immigrated to Southern California, near Redondo Beach, and he became a coastal lover. He went to UCLA, got a law degree, and eventually found his way into working for one of our state senators, the local senators in California, working on coastal preservation lawmaking. And that really launched him into the sphere that he occupies still now, after his death, where he helped co-write Proposition 20, which was the Coastal Initiative, which established the Coastal Commission in 1972. And then subsequently, there was a campaign that Peter helped generate successfully the passage of the law that Jerry Brown then signed in 1976, which created the Coastal Act, or the Coastal Act, which then created the Coastal Commission in perpetuity. And later he became the executive director of the agency, and he was that director, the ED, for 26 years. Even though he was the third one, there were some epic battles that happened during his tenure that really exemplified this collision between people and science and the coastline and the uses of what people want to do along the coast. So one of Peter's favorite quotes, and it's said so many times, and I think we need to hear it every day, as much as we can, that the coast is never saved; it's always being saved. And I think that really encapsulates his perspective on how important it is to continue to work towards solutions and to always be revisiting where you've been, not forget where you've come from. So we honor Peter Douglas with this award. And similarly, it's around coastal access, public access, recreation, enjoyment of the coast for generations now and in the future. And the unique thing about this award is that it can be an individual or an organization, because sometimes it's not one person who does that kind of work. It's an organization, a group that really can make a difference. So we're really lucky to have Peter Douglas as part of our California lore, as well as Joe Johnson.
Yeah, amazing story. Yeah, and the connection with ASBPA that you mentioned with Joe, it really hits home for me, in the way that you all honor these heroes and then honor other people by putting their name next to them, right? Getting those awards is really humbling. We saw that at the conference this year. So the ASBPA in California have always had a strong connection. So you mentioned Joe Johnson being the editor of Shore and Beach in the 70s. And then, he was followed by other editors from California. Ron Flick, Leslie Ewing actually just stepped down last year. So to me, the California ASBPA connection has always been there, and it's always been very strong. That was one of the reasons that when I was brought on as executive director a couple years ago, I made it a really important initiative that we return to California every 4 years. None of this, oh, we go there once every 10 years. This is part of who we are as a nation. So I just wanted to reflect with you a little bit about that recent H2O National Coastal Conference that we held jointly in Long Beach. It was fantastic, wasn't it?
It was great. It was so good. We were so happy to have ASBPA come back so quickly, because of just what you've said. We have an 1,100-mile coastline on the outer coast, and then hundreds of miles inside San Francisco Bay. This is a playground for so many people, um, and so to be connected on the national scale really means a lot to us. California gets a rap for being sort of out on its own, doing its own thing, but we recognize that we're part of a country, that there's other miles of coastline. And so, gosh, it was just a great conference to have, our Hawaii chapter really play a part in helping organize that Pacific flair on things. And so many members come from across the country, from the Gulf, from the East Coast. We're I think we started a Pacific Northwest chapter at that conference. It's launching because people from the Northwest came and saw, wow, this is what can happen if you have a local chapter. The national folks will come. So I'm just really excited about what's going to come next for them. But yeah, and Long Beach was really fun, and CSBPA. We really believe in the pipeline of the next generation, and so we sponsored the mixer event for the Students and New Professionals chapter, and funnily enough, within about an hour, I got a phone call from someone asking if we could up the sponsorship because this mixer was so successful that it was getting wiped out really quickly. And I said, I don't think I can authorize that solo. But I'm really happy it's being so well attended and so energizing for the next generation of people to come together and see, you could be part of this. You're part of this community now. So go forth, have a good time, get to know your peers. You never know what's going to happen next.
That's right. Yeah, the students and new professionals at the conference was definitely one of the most impressive things. They were there in high numbers, 70 plus. So that I think as we wrap up this podcast, let's kind of head in that direction. We always like to hear from you, local legends, what advice you might have for the next generation of coastal leaders.
Oh boy. Well, I don't feel like I'm old enough to be giving advice yet, but I would say um, two things. One would be uh, don't stop, because there's always going to be a new challenge. And even in tough times, there's going to be a bright spot somewhere. That sounds really vague, but what I do mean in that, in this current state of affairs that we are in, science is being challenged, and we're going to need new thinking. We're going to need innovative people. We're going to need people who understand technologies in ways that they haven't been applied before. So there's so many opportunities, and there's so much noise. There's so much noise that's bombarding us right now that can be really a downer. Let's just say it. It can be a real downer. So dig in, don't give up. The other thing I would say, this is my own personal mantra that I've tried to live my career with, is to know your 3 R's: reach, relevance, and research. So know your science. You're going to know your science, your engineering, you're going to know your technical stuff. Don't take it for granted, but get to know it. Your reach is your communication. Learn how to communicate. Use any new platform if that's your thing, or learn how to write. You really need to know how to write. AI is not going to do all your writing for you. It really isn't. So know how to communicate. That's your reach. And know your relevance of your work, because that's what will help people care. If you hit them only in their head, they're going to maybe care. If you hit them in their heart, they are going to lean in, because you fight for what you love. And if you love the coast, and if you love your science, and if you get someone else to love the coast because of your science, you're winning. So reach, relevance, and research. That's what I would say to the next generation.
Great advice. You do sound like a local legend. So, Doug George, thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you so much. I am so honored to be part of this whole experience with ASBPA.
That's it for today's episode of Shaping Shores. I'm Nicole, and thanks so much for spending part of your day with us. If today's conversation inspired you, help us continue this work. Become a member or make a gift at asbpa.org. To hear more stories from the people preserving U.S. coasts, follow or subscribe wherever you listen. Together, we're shaping a resilient future for our nation's beaches and shores. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you again on next week's episode.